to now introduce James Brockman to you. If there is anyone who displays a greater mastery of both the technical and artistic sides of bookbinding than James Brockman, I don't know of him or her. He is a consummate craftsman who has earned the ungrudging and admiring respect of every fine binder, and is particularly known for his innovative structures. Recently, he has been exploring the concept and refining the technique of the concave spine. A splendid example of a concave spine binding will be available at the auction tomorrow evening. This afternoon, he will show us just how it's done. Let's welcome James Brockman.
My talk today is about the binding of Cicero, which is on exhibition here. And as you have noticed, you may have noticed it's got a concave spine. This was a structure that I first discovered some 7 or 8 years ago, and I've been refining it ever since, particularly building up to this lecture. All the operations involved in the structure will be illustrated in slides that I'll show initially, and then I will demonstrate the more crucial points after the slides. First of all, I'd like to make the argument. My binding career has so far lasted nearly 39 years, and during this time I have observed the function of tens of thousands of bindings. There is no doubt in my mind that books with paper leaves must have their spine supported with adhesives and spine linings if they are to survive in regular use for hundreds of years. As bookbinders, survival of the book is our first priority, but the modern binder wants the best of both worlds: survival, strength, and flexibility. The question is, how compatible are the two? The flexible spine allows movement. Movement equals wear. Wear leads to collapse. What I am proposing is flexibility without movement. The best of both worlds. The concave spine holds the spine in a constantly open shape so that when the book is used, the spine does not flex. Therefore, it follows that no movement equals no wear. No wear equals no collapse. The first 5 slides I want to show are really just to show how the book suffers, which it has to endure as a result of binders forcing the spine convex and then allowing the spine to flex. We all recognize this as being a rounding of the book against its own will with a hammer. Next, of course, rounding and backing again with a hammer, persuading the sections to go out and forcing them into a shape that they're not really comfortable with. And then really just to show the astonishing amount of movement that a book goes through, a flexible binding. This is a Douglas Cockrell binding of 1900, which I've got here today, and we can look at closer later. This example of flexible binding clearly shows the enormous amount of movement the spine must endure. Here the book is closed, obviously, and here open. This is a book that is 57 millimeters thick. That's about 2 1/4 inches, and the center of the text block has moved 32 millimeters. That's 1 1/4 inches. Every time the book goes from being closed to open, this much movement is involved, which is quite astonishing. The following sequence of operations illustrate the binding of Cicero using my concave spine structure, and particularly focuses on the detailed techniques required to produce a successful concave spine binding. A lot of the techniques, of course, are very similar to things you've seen demonstrated, covering in full leather, that sort of thing. So I'll go through each process, but some of them are much more detailed than others, for obvious reasons. This shows the text block ready for sewing, with loose guards in place, along the first section here, and of course also on the last section. It's got toned vellum end leaves here, with an Allen Tord calf joint, which will be sewn in, and the joint is compensated for with card and a waste sheet here to protect the vellum during the binding process. The book is sewn up in the conventional way, and here it is on the sewing frame. Now, with this book, I've used 7 13mm unbleached cotton tapes, using a link stitch over the tapes. The unbleached cotton is stiffened with gelatine, which holds it rigid during the sewing operation, and I'll talk more about that later. Also, it's important to note that the cotton is cut on the bias. This gives 40% more threads across the joint, so for no extra thickness in the tapes, there's 40% more strength in the cotton. After sewing, the sewing holes are closed with a bone folder, just to stop the adhesive getting in too deeply into the spine, and swelling is adjusted by just tapping against the knocking down iron. Now, it's important with a concave spine structure to allow a considerable amount of swelling. My early ones, really, I didn't allow enough, and I've been experimenting with this, and I think about 10% extra on the width of the text block is necessary for a successful shaped spine. Now, you'll see this is altogether much more gentle than the hammering process of rounding the book. The book is gripped between millboard and is held with an elasticated tube bandage here, just simply going around. This protects, this has got a gilt edge, this is gilt before sewing, obviously. The bandage doesn't mark the gilding. And the spine is simply moulded over a suitable cardboard tube. I've worked out some measurements, and I think the tube diameter should be approximately 33%, a third, more than the width of the text block. So width of the tube, about a third more than the text block width. The bandage holds the book into the concave shape after it's just eased over the tube, and then it can just simply be lowered into a laying press with the bandage still in place. It's a good idea to drop, I mean, this is obviously, this press is in extremely good condition, so the two cheeks are square with each other. So if the book is dropped in so that everything is square with the cheeks, then that ensures that the book is square before any adhesive is put on. Here, the gaps between the sections are being closed. Before the sewing holes were closed, now the book is in the shape it's going to be retained in. The gaps between the sections are just boned down, again to stop excessive adhesive penetration. I glue my spines up with edible gelatine because I believe it to be the best adhesive. It's easily reversible. Not that this binding would ever need to be rebound, hopefully. That's the whole point. But here the edible gelatine adhesive is being put on to the spine between the unbleached cotton tapes. The spine linings are left long, in fact about the same length as the tapes, because they will be used for the board attachment later. It's a split board attachment, so they will all go together and form a tongue, and there will be a constant cotton joint which will be inserted into the tongue, so a lot of rigidity along the spine. Also at this stage, after the cotton strips have been put on between the tapes, the tapes are softened with warm water. That activates the gelatine that was in the tape. If you remember, I said that they were stiffened with gelatine when they were sewn. Now by putting warm water onto the tapes, where the sewing threads are, that activates that adhesive, and now the spine is glued constantly. The whole length of the spine is glued. An acid-free machine-made paper lining is cut to width and glued on to the spine, just moulding over the tapes and cotton. Now the board attachment and the shaping of the board is crucial to successful opening. I hope you can see this clearly. I'll show it you again later when I'm doing the demonstration. The cotton linings and tapes follow the shape of the spine, and the board is a split board type. In this case, it's two 2mm mill boards put together, and there's a bevel cut back on the underside of the inside board and on the outside of the top board. This bevel allows the cotton to stretch across before it goes in. So, as opposed to most split board structures where you have usually a thin board on the inside, here there's quite a thick board. This space in the joint allows for highly successful opening, allows the board to open right back through over 180 degrees when the book is finished, and I've got the book here so I can show you that in more detail. This joint space I think of as being very similar to a French groove, where you can, the leather and the spine and the joint support material flexes over quite a wide area, at least a couple of mil in this case. So the joint leather is much less stressed than it would be if it was a tight fold. So the laminated boards are simply made up. They're made by lining the 2mm moldboard with craft, an acid-free craft, using paste, and then the split is put together with PVA, because that will also coincide with the inserting the tongue, which will be PVA. This is something I'll demonstrate later. It's simply beveling off that 2 or 3 mil off the back edge of the board using a spoke shave. You can see the little piece coming out here. Next, the boards are cushioned in pretty much the normal way, using a spoke shave, and going down to the craft lining, so that gives a guide as to how far to cushion the board down. Here, there's still not very many spine linings on, but the book is held in the shape that it'll finally be left in. But the tongue has been formed by sticking the tapes and the strips that we'll put between the tapes onto the waste sheet, and then that's inserted into the split board. These grooves are a design detail, which I won't get involved with now. Now this shot, it just shows before the end bands are sewn. It just shows this little, you see the little bridge across. Again, just emphasizing that crucial point about board attachment. It's a little strange sewing end bands into a concave shape, but you soon get your hang of it. They're simply sewn on the normal way. This is double end band sewn on. It's polyester, obviously going down below the kettle stitch. Now, the spine is now heavily lined. You can see the book at this point has been capped up to protect the gilt edges now that the end bands are sewn. It's held in the press, and the spine linings go on. Now, these particular bindings had 10 layers of acid-free machine-made paper as spine linings. That really is to make it very stiff, obviously, so because we don't want any movement at all in the spine. Once the spine linings are dry, they can be sanded just with a piece of sandpaper over a dowel, just to remove any irregularities. Sorry? Oh, sort of an average weight cartridge, I suppose. I don't know, 120 grams, maybe a bit less, 110. Here the spine linings are sanded off at an angle to allow for the turn-ins, because it'll be obviously be a tight back binding, and to stop any ridges or as mentioned by Don and I think Tony as well, the area rising in front of the caps. You've got so many spine linings, that does give you the luxury of sanding down to allow for turn-ins so that you have a nice smooth spine. Oh, it's quite thick, maybe 2 mil. And this also helps that, of course, because it reduces the width of the cap, which will be formed. I've got the binding here, so you can have a closer look. And I've also got I've got books in 2 stages, part done. I've got blank books, which are exactly the same as the fine bindings, the same number of sections, same size, same makeup, and everything. The 2 blank books. One is sewn. So you can all see how it shapes easily over the board former, the card former, and the other one has got one board attached and the other board is ready to go on. So I can show you clearly how that works. It may vary a little bit as it comes up. I mean, obviously you need to be aware, but you can sand off and shape the edges of the spine linings to allow for better opening. It's something that you can look at and you can see how well the board's going to function, bearing in mind the covering leather that's in place. You probably reduce it slightly as you go up. I mean, you just really watch it closely. I would say they were reduced. Now, something else that I've incorporated into this structure is this text block support. Of course, the thing about rounding and backing is that you've got a joint which the board will sit into. So it will give, of course, quite good support, particularly on books that aren't too thick, to the text block. And it'll stop it sagging, but of course on thicker books it won't stop it sagging. This actually here is a little piece of 2mm millboard which is glued along the bottom edge of the board. On some of the earlier bindings I put it all round, but on these ones it's just along the bottom. And that just acts as a text block support. And of course, because there's so many linings on the spine, the spine is so fixed in place, because if the text block tends to drop on the joints, then it will sit onto this text block support and the rest of the book can't sag. So it gives very good support to a book that's in a shelf. Now, back cornering, we've been hearing a lot about back cornering. It was something that gave me considerable problems on exactly the best way to back corner and to allow to get the leather as thick as possible, to mold it in around the caps and for it to function well. And after much experimenting, I found that the best thing to do was to back corner on the inside, but also, more crucially than that, really, is to leave the spine lining square here. I don't know about you people, but I always tend to just take off the spine linings top and bottom, so the cap is just softer as it comes in around the back cornering. But with this particular structure, if these are left square, then the distance the leather travels here when it's covered is identical to the distance when the book is shut. So the extra squareness of these corners means there's much less strain on the leather at that point. Yeah, well, the same as the, I always make the end bands a little bit lower than the board because you've got two pieces of leather folded over it. So you really need to have the end bands maybe a thickness and a half of leather less than the board, because you've got one layer of leather on the board edge, obviously, and you've got two layers in the cap, so it folds back on itself. And you don't want the book to sit on the cap when it's standing. So the whole end band just needs to be just that little bit lower than the squares, and so the spine linings would equal the end band. Now, I haven't dealt too much with pairing. I've just put it in because it's all pretty much the usual sort of thing. This is just edge pairing with a knife on a litho stone, and then pairing with a spoke shave. I measure. Not everybody does. This is, and I hold with a clamp still. I'm very old-fashioned. So this is, I've got the spoke shave here. I'll show you the spoke shave later, and I've got a piece of paired leather, and I'll show you spoke shaving boards. This is all pretty standard stuff. Again, cornering, I prefer, it's funny really, we seem to be covering the same things. There's so much of this. Tony was talking about it, of course, Don was as well. I prefer to do it this way. I guess we all do it differently. So that's just mitering the corners. Now, of course, covering the book, it is a little different. You can't draw the leather on around the spine, but maybe that's not a bad thing because you're not going to stretch it over the joints. You need to leave quite a bit of leather in the spine area to go into the concave shape. So it takes a bit of moulding and care to make sure it really is sticking. So this is simply using, again, quite a big dowel, wooden dowel, rubbing through paper, just to make sure it's thoroughly stuck to the spine. This is moulding the caps, so similar to what Tony was doing this morning, just pulling it out into the back cornering that's on the inside of the board, shaping the cap around. It's a pretty weird cap, as you appreciate, but you get used to seeing it, you get used to handling it, and after a while it does sort of fall into place. But it takes a little bit of working out how to cope with the back cornering, how to bring the leather over, how to shape it. But again, you can have a closer look on the finished binding here. It does I mean, after a while, it does start to come as naturally as binding something with a convex spine. Oh, actually, there's one other point I wanted to make on that previous slide. Here you can see the text block support. You see the board is a little wider here, both sides, and it just tapers down. So the leather, the covering leather, is brought over that and onto the turn-in on the inside. So it just covers this is obviously the tail of the book. That's the text block support at the bottom edge of the book.
Could you solve that problem by not having it clear at all?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, yes. But I mean, you wreck your edges, but you do it. But, well, if it was on a shelf, I mean, that would be the problem. Simply that I prefer to rub down quite a bit through paper, partly because you can smooth out a lot of irregularities and so on through paper. It works well. This is the book. It looks rather dark from here. I hope you can see it. But there's these grooves here, so I'm just moulding it into the groove. Also, from a finishing point of view, I mean, after some of the previous presentations, it's probably not what people appreciate hearing, but the less grain you have, the better the gold tooling is. I mean, you know, it just can't be helped. That's the way life is. So it sometimes, I mean, and Mike Wilcox, who's going to talk about finishing maybe tomorrow, I think, will confirm this. If you want good finishing, you don't want a lot of grain. This is just moving on. A lot of these operations are very similar. I know that people will ask me questions about finishing, so I want to just deal with, this is filling in the inside of the board. The joint has gone down. Here's the Allen Tord calf joint. The capping's still on the book. During covering, I use cling film, which I imagine it's the same thing, called the same thing in the US. It's very thin plastic, which I just wrap the book with over the top of this waste paper here. You do them again. I can show you that they go beyond the because the foredge goes the opposite way. It's a convex foredge, so it has to. The foredge squares are usually well, they will be in fact larger than the head and tail squares. You could make them all the same if you wanted to, but it would mean the head and tail would be a lot larger. So here we are. This is just the board lines going in. The turnings have been trimmed out. The board's been filled in with an acid-free card. The joints have been put down. This is a lining paper going in. This binding has got a toned vellum topper, which goes in on the inside of the board, and of course it's had the toned vellum flyleaf. Now, I mean, I'm not really here today to talk about the design. The design is based on a sword shape, a Roman sword for Cicero, and incorporates a very thin piece of stainless steel, which is attached to the front and back. So what I wanted to do was, I always like to incorporate, particularly on an unusual structure, I always like to incorporate the design somehow with the structure, with the concave shape. So what I did was I echoed the dip that the concave spine gives you in these 4 grooves that go here. And they also are, just because the way that they run off at the ends over the cushioning of the boards, you get this sword shape. So I just wanted to pick up on the same curve here as the dips in the board, which then gave me the sword shape, which then allowed, as you see later, for a piece of stainless steel to go on here, again in the sword shape. So it just was I felt it was a nice link, taking it through with the structure. This is applying very thin strips of finely paired white leather. This is leather which I pair on my pairing machine, and then tool blind lines. I'm afraid it doesn't show up too clear here, but the blind lines are tools around the little recesses or the dips in the board. The leather is cut very, very thin with a scalpel, and then just put in with a PVA paste mix, just laid into the line. The line is scratched first of all. I've got some of the leather here if you want to see it. Now for the tooling, just to cover the sort of straightforward tooling first, this is a pair of finishing tools which I designed and have made by one of the tool cutters. It's a negative and positive tool. I've used it quite a few times now. If you see that the shape on this one and the shape on that one, they're exactly the same design, but one is negative and one is positive. And so what I do is use these. It gives me, I find it gives me, I enjoy using these tools because it allows me to tool in so many different ways. I can use them so it looks very traditional. I can do them so it looks like almost like a traditional roll. And I can use them as a frame or put them in a circle. Or I can use them in a very modern way and just space them out and move them around. Now here you'll see the tools have been blinded in through here. Ready for the tooling, and the impressions are being glared in. I use a rotating pen with a shellac glare, the BS glare, which is the British Standard glare, of course, which is the British glare, or in this case I was using the French Fixor. The book is tooled in 3 shades of gold leaf. Lemon gold, a neutral gold, and a red gold, and palladium, which is silver. So there's 4 different shades of leaf. The gold is picked up on the tool, as you can see. I mean, obviously Michael Wilcox will be dealing with this sort of thing, but it's picked up on the tool and stamped into the impression. Now, of course, the question, that's just an extra slide I've slipped in. It's the 2 books that together, the one that was commissioned from Rochester here, and the one that will be sold at the auction tomorrow night. They're both identical apart from the sequence of the leaf. This one obviously is waiting, it's been blinded in, it's waiting for its tooling. That's a discipline thing. It's always worth sticking a ticket in the top of your book. I mean, a lot of you know this, but so you always know which way up the book is, never any confusion. But this one's been is blinded in, ready for tooling. This one has been tooled, and it's just waiting for the next stage. Now, of course, the thing that everybody always asks me, how do you letter them? Well, you stick a label on them. This is simply a type holder, open front type holder with the title set in type, spaced out with paper spaces to give it good letter spacing. And then the paper is then cut out and transferred to the spine. It's taped in place with masking tape. This is just the masking tape in place for the stainless steel to stop the adhesive later, so ignore that for the moment. Book's held in a press here with a pad which is felt lined to protect it. And this is a single piece type holder, which is homemade. It's something anyone can make. It's just a piece of brass, obviously a wooden handle. One single screw there, and you can set one piece of type at a time. So it's just like a handle letter, but it means you can use type as handle letters. So the process here is to stamp through the paper impression to glare up the impression. Obviously the whole spine isn't glared, just the impression. Again, using the rotating pen. And just carefully glaring in. Takes about the BS or the Fixor glare takes about 5 minutes to dry. Ignore what it says on the bottle about leaving it for now for the BS. You put on so little, and this is a 0.6, I think, rotating pen, so it's very controllable. You don't get a lot of glare going up the sides of the impression, so it keeps the tooling much cleaner. It needs much less cleaning out. I've had this, this pen has been in constant use for 15 years and I've never cleaned it out. And that is a fact. I just put the lid on and always store it standing on the lid end and make sure that it's always got some glare in it. And it's been left for several months at a time. But there is maybe a sort of slight proviso I ought to mention actually in relation to that, because Rotring changed the design of their nibs, and this is one of the old-fashioned ones, and it's relatively short. The tube here of the nib is relatively short to where it goes into the reservoir inside, and I think some of the later ones had a longer tube, and I think if people have tried it and have had problems, it may be because they've got one of the later ones. And I don't know, I haven't looked into this for a long time, I don't know if designs have changed or there are other makes, but I think that's probably the critical thing. I think it's the length of tube, of the length of the nib tube. Okay, so here we are, we're glaring in the tooling impression, and then simply the same way as tooling the on the sides, picking the gold up, heating the letters up individually in the single piece type holder, picking the gold up and just simply going into the impression. That's the finished book. The stainless steel is a very thin piece of stainless steel which is polished and is put on with adhesive. It's a contact adhesive that dries out thoroughly. I experimented by scratching the back of stainless steel and sticking it to leather, and it sticks well enough. Here you can see the four-edge square is a little larger, and you can also see the shape of the four-edge. The leaves are slightly irregular because of gilding before sewing, so they move around a little, which I like. And you can see the different shades of gold and palladium through the tooling. The whole book is sort of monotones. The tone vellum inside, the black leather, the stainless steel, the tooling, the white leather, the end bands. I've tried to just keep it all to monotones. Now this goes back to what I was saying about the board attachment and that crucial thing of undercutting the inside board, if you remember. You can see how well the board opens. I mean, you've got virtually an opening like a Victorian book, which a lot of people here won't approve of. But I like it. I mean, this is terrific. If the text block is dead square and the board opens right back, and it works well. Now, again, just a few shots of showing the book opening. This is quite interesting. You can see how early it starts to roll. It's just starting to lift here. We're only open at the title page. You've only got a few leaves, the fly leaves, and the first couple of blanks, and also, and already the spine is starting to roll, and these sections are starting to lift. They lift cleanly off. You get none of the problems with torquing that you get with a flexible spine book. With a flexible spine book, it'll twist head to tail. And of course, if leaves can abrade, I mean, all sorts of things can happen, but I mean, that could be a problem, which there's no movement in this at all. So again, we go back to the same principle, no movement equals no wear. Opening a little bit further, again, a little bit more lift, a little bit more roll. It's gradually working through. And then opening in the center with the spine still exactly the same shape as it was when the book is shut. And then just a final shot of the book with both boards open. The only thing that looks different really from this photograph would be the shape here. And maybe the lettering. I guess that looks, although it depends how you use it visually, you can see it either way probably. So if I now demonstrate a few of the the techniques, and then it may be easier with the lights up and you see what I'm doing for you to stop me as I go along and to ask questions then if you need to. This is the Douglas Cockrell binding that I showed you earlier. This was bound in 1900. It's signed and dated, and you can see the huge amount of movement in the spine that a flexible book has. I mean, it's astonishing. I mean, the head actually works worse than the tail because it would, of course, because it's sagged. So I think the things I should show you. Well, first of all, I've got the book in two states. These are both blank books, but they're both based on the binding, which is here. That's there. I'll show you more of that later, maybe. That'll be easy, otherwise it'll get in the way of the camera, possibly. This book is sewn. I obviously haven't put vellum ends on this, but it's got conventional ends with a cotton joint. It's sewn on these 7 tapes cut on the bias. If you remember, by cutting on the bias, they're 40% stronger than being cut square to the selvage. and then it's a link stitch. I often don't use a link stitch if I'm rounding and backing because I find it doesn't allow enough movement in the spine, but actually with this, it does pull the spine over. And interestingly enough, the spine is, if you look at a book, when you take it off the sewing frame, you'll very often find, I mean, majority of cases, you'll find that it's actually starting to go concave. It's spectacular that binders have ignored this for so many hundreds of years. So, okay, this is simply placed between mill boards, and the swelling needs to be adjusted, as I showed. The laying press. And I'm afraid this is all they could find me, so it's rather brutal. But it can be simply tapped just to reduce the swelling. And as I say, I think it needs to be about 10% wider than the text block here. So it's just very gently reduced. So, but it is important to have that degree of adjustment in the structure so that you can, it allows you just that little bit of flexibility for pushing the shape in. Now, by keeping the same mill boards, I find it's best to stop them from slipping to just use some double-sided tape, which is gone. Maybe I can use a bit of masking tape. Strange. It'll just stop the board from slipping. I'm sorry about this. I had it here before I went for lunch. So the board just can be temporarily held in place with the tape. Now, by simply knocking it up square to the back and putting on this elasticated bandage, I've just doubled it over. It's the sort that you have for a knee strain or a wrist strain or something. It can be just, I hope, slipped on here. And that's particularly kind to any edge treatment that you've already done. If the book had been gilt or you know, obviously it's not going to mark, but it'll hold the book very securely. And then, by using this tube, which is about a third wider than the spine, the book can be very simply just eased into shape. Like the double-sided tape would have been better, but it's slipped slightly. But you can get the general idea of how it's very easy to shape the spine. To the tube. So you've got a huge amount of control. I mean, you see how much kinder it is to the book than all that hammering. I hope that's clear enough, but it's not so easy with the board sliding around. And then it can be simply flipped over and lowered into the laying press, while with the bandage still on it, holding it. Now I haven't, there's no presses here or anything like that, so apart from this press, so I can't re-glue on boards and that sort of thing. So what I'll do is because I've got things prepared at each stage, I can talk about them and show you how they're put on and how it's dealt with. but I won't start gluing things up. I mean, it'll just waste too much time. So at this stage, the gaps between the gatherings are just closed by simply just boning down the leaves. It'll stop too much penetration of adhesive and help with opening. And also, the cotton linings will be put on next, again, cut on the bias, and glued in with gelatine in between the existing tapes. And then the gelatine on the tapes activated with warm water so that the whole spine is glued. So there's glue under the tapes as well, because the warm water activates the gelatine that's in the tape. If anyone wants to ask questions as I go along, please feel free to do so. Now I'd like to... Okay, well there you can see both the drawing and here you can see it in practice. The split goes in, I suppose, about 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches. It's two 2mm boards. Here they haven't been cushioned, but they've been taken off on this back edge. So you'll see that's where the tongue will go in. That's the bevel on the inside. This is the inside where the brown paper is, and the bevel on the outside. Now I'll just demonstrate simply taking that off. I've got a piece of board here, a piece of 2mm board. So I'll quickly take that off with a spoke shave. Getting paranoid, I think everything's disappearing. So this is simply just held with a small backing board, hung over the edge of the stone. And then with a spoke shave, this has got one of these collector boxes on it. And this should be pre-marked, obviously, to about 2 to 3 mil. What I'll do, actually, I'll call this the inner board because it's more crucial that the inside is beveled than the outside. The outside just makes it flow easier over the joint. The inside is what's crucial to make the board function correctly. So I'll do the inside. So I'll simply mark down there with a pencil. And then I need to spoke shave for the whole width of the board. This will be slightly easier. Just a minute. Slightly easier if I put it on a board here. This stone isn't very square. So that can be done very easily, just by taking it off like that. And then possibly just finished by sanding. I can just, I've got the book here, which is at the next stage, which has got one board attached, the underboard, and the top board, which is loose. But I can just, in case you're interested about the spoke shave, I can just show you, now with spoke shave, you take it that I've spoke shaved both the inside and the outside. And I'll now just quickly start spoke shaving the cushioning on the outside in the same way. Again, there's a craft liner in the center of the board, so it's possible to spoke shave down to that. This gives a very controlled bevel. You can see, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but can you see that brown paper just appearing along the edge here? And then it's got a pencil line here which I pre-marked, so I'll just go in a little bit and pick up on that. It's important to have obviously a very sharp spoke shave, but also to have the spoke shave at an angle like this, so then you don't snag too much. It'll slice through better. And it's very quick and easy just to go around and cushion the boards all down to a very even thickness because of the the paper that's in it. I haven't tried it. This is English board. Can't you get this here? This is Thompson's. And then so that's the cushioning of the board. And that's just gone over where the split is. The split is still open, of course. But that won't affect it. That'll, when it's glued in, that'll just close up and you'll have a nice even edge. I'll have a nice even edge right round the edge of the board. Okay. Now the board attachment, the boards, as I say, are held on with the tongue. Here it is. I've made it up on this one. I've stuck the tapes and the spine linings to the waste sheet. And what I've done with this one actually is put all the spine linings on beforehand, so it'd be held in the final shape. But the split board then, it's quite a tight split. Because it's two equal boards, it's not as easy to open as a normal split, which usually has one much thinner board. So it just needs a little bit of opening, and then I also use small brushes. So simply some PVA. If you need a little bit more time for working, a little bit of paste with it, just a mixture, and some paste can be worked in very simply, and then the board slips onto this tongue. Just get it on. There we are. And lined up so it's level with the back edge. This has been pre-cut, obviously, with the squares decided on, and this larger four-edge square which protects the convex four-edge. But a guide for that really would be for if when the book's standing, it must be clear of the tabletop. Now the spine linings on this one have been pre-sanded. You can actually see where it's been. You may be able to see it. It's like these sort of almost like contour lines where it's been sanded off just to remove any lumps and bumps from the tapes. And then the book can be. Take this one out. That's a leading question, isn't it? It had never occurred to me. So simply with a dowel and sandpaper, sanding along, and then of course sanding off here. What I've done is to mark a pencil line. I don't know if you can see it. Pencil line here, which is the depth of my turn-in. I would calculate the width of turn-in I would have. It would obviously be edge paired in the normal way, but I would allow it to come to there, so I would sand off to there. And it's quite a useful tip, maybe just to put pencil lines on the linings and then sand until the pencil lines have gone. You then know that you're sanding evenly all across. So that can be simply sanded off. So it'll mean that the leather is nice and smooth along here, but you've still got room for quite a generous and quite a strong turn-in. This book, I've just sewn very quickly before I left home a very simple end band on here. And I've also, on the one board that's attached, I've put on the text block support for you to see. I find it's a good idea to keep it well away from the corners, because it would interrupt with mitering the corners and making a very neat corner, and also keep it away from the back corner. It doesn't really need to be the full width of the board. And you'll see how it's the height of the square. So it just fills in the distance between the text block and the edge of the board. Now the only concern I have about this is when the leather comes over here, which it will of course during covering, it could be in direct contact with the edge of the leaves. So in fact on these bindings I've put a small piece of black paper on this lip, which acts as a barrier between the leather and the text block. So this, after it's stuck on and is well fixed, if I have any concern about it, sometimes I put a piece of Japanese tissue over here, which strengthens it up. But the covering leather will add quite a lot of strength, obviously, to it. And it's simply shaped at each end with a knife. I've marked this. You may not be able to see it, but I've made a couple of little pencil marks with the dividers, and so I'll shave off from here down to there, just to really make it as unobtrusive as possible and as neat as possible. So simply there, and then the covering leather will be quite easy to mould the covering leather around that.
Is this text block support something that this sort of structure needs more than others? Or?
I think it probably is, yes, because you haven't, or any structure that isn't backed. I think maybe, I mean, I haven't really thought it through, to be honest, but I think perhaps any structure which isn't backed, which doesn't have somewhere for the boards to locate, would benefit from a text block support. It seems pretty logical. I mean, Sandy Cockrell would say, I mean, jokingly really, that the best thing to do was to cut off the bottom squares, then the text block sat square onto the shelf, so there's no chance of the spine sagging. But of course, in practice, that's not always practical. I don't think he ever did it, but I think one other person did it. Christopher Skelton did it on a book he produced about Eric Gill. Huge, thick book with no squares at the tail. And then the back cornering, simply just with a knife, just slicing over. This one's already been done, obviously, but just simply slicing off down to nothing, and just taking off the little square on the corner. There's just a strip of 2mm millboard onto the bottom edge of the board. It's just an extra piece of board that's stuck on. And then when the book is standing, you see, and it's shut, I mean, if this was a book in a shelf with books supporting each side, this little ledge, the text block support, would just stop the text block from sagging. So it's just a support. It's a little, you know, it's like having your fingers under it to hold it. It's only the width of the square. It's only the width of the square, and it only needs to be about 2mm long, because this binding has got such a rigid spine that providing you're supporting, the reason this is squirming around is because this board's not attached, just to explain. The spine is so stiff and so rigid that if these outside, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 leaves are supported by this 2mm text block support, then any stress will go back through those leaves into the spine linings and be supported through the spine linings to stop the centre of the book dropping. What, the board? No, well, you're saying the pages at the centre of the book can pull loose from the spine? Well, not unless the adhesive gives out totally. It would have to be in extremely damp conditions for a long time or something like that. But well, it's sewn on 6 tapes, so it's got threads going along the centre of every section. And if you think of a book that's rounded and backed, as this one is, the sections in the centre of the book aren't backed. If that's what you're trying to say, if you're trying to say that the sections are hooked over each other so they give support, well, in fact, in a book like this, they don't have support. Maybe. Okay, moving swiftly on. I think most of the other slides and stages were pretty obvious. So maybe what I should do now is just discuss the book, which is here, and just show you the function, and maybe try and answer any questions. I mean, we've been going for some time anyway. Answer any questions that relate directly to this, if I can. Yeah. For the turning, yeah. It's just slit, yeah, the joint's slit down. There's the book. It's got the toned vellum ends with the untowed joint. You can see that the spine doesn't move, but the book just moves its path. This is drummed on. I've used a technique which Roger Powell used to do of having a flexible end, of just gluing it around the edge. So the vellum is loose in the centre. The vellum here is stuck down solid. I think it should be all right. I mean, I can just sort of show you the other aspects of it. The caps, which maybe you can see. Yeah, I'll turn it around like that. No good? That's the caps. You can see how the back corner is on the inside. What? Take it back. Yeah. Lean over. Don't lean over. You see the back cornering here, and the way the cap just flows around and then just lays over the top of the end band. And just the opening there. So, I mean, I think that probably pretty much concludes it, unless you've got any more questions. Well, it sort of started with the first concave, with the first single hinge bindings I made, which were all metal bindings, and the first one of those was, I suppose, about 85. So that created a concave spine because I was having a single hinge binding, which the tube of the binding, the hinge tube, went the whole width of the spine. So when the book was sewn onto the rings, which were as part of the hinge tube, it automatically produced a concave spine. And so I was aware that I'd created it, but I really wanted to move on to do it with normal bookbinding materials rather than using metals and woods and that sort of thing. So this is why, with these particular ones, I mean, all the materials are just the normal binding materials you'd expect to find.
What have you found to be the weakness of the structure in looking at your 15 years old work?
What, as far as being concave, or? I did a concave spine for the British Library. It was a commission, and of course, I mean, it's the same. Every book will eventually go down the hinge, but this book shouldn't go in the middle of the spine. For instance, the reason this book is sitting here is because, I mean, that's what's happened. It's broken, and so this particular structure, that should never happen. So you've still got, obviously, similar problems here to a book that's rounded and back. The commission I did for the British Library, I really wanted a book that was going to be there forever. So I did a concave spine with metal hinges, much smaller, much neater than I'd done before. But so that really would make, I feel, as far as anyone can tell, an indestructible structure. Well, I think there could be a huge future for it, yeah. I think, yes, I mean, I wonder why the book was traditionally bound in the way it was, why it was forced into a round. If you look at rows of books, particularly heavy, thick books, they're all sitting on the shelf and they're all going concave. And it's almost as if the book's been trying to tell us something and no one's ever picked up the message.
Logic takes you only so far in the history of bookbinding. Take a square, which makes no sense at all for most of the books this is used on, and yet there it is, it's done every 6th century.
Yes, I mean, you can only have theories about how the round spine came about and how squares came about. I think perhaps the convex spine came about by books being stored flat, one on top of the other, having square edges, square spines, square edges, probably no squares on the boards, they were cut flush as well. And as the books were stacked up, because of the swelling due to the folds, they would have been vellum books, due to the folds in the vellum, due to sewing threads, the swelling at this point had to go somewhere. and you stack up a lot of books, it becomes very heavy, and it pops out. It can't pop in. It has to pop out. So I think maybe people just got used to seeing books with convex spines, and so it sort of then went on from there. But to take a book and to glue it into a convex shape, and then to expect it to do that, is pretty strange, to put it mildly. I mean, you know, every time you open that book, it has to move that much. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I suppose I've found about 20 in the last 5 years. Apart from I did a small edition of about 15. So no, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying, why don't I have it concave but put a round spine on as well? Yeah. Yeah, you could. No reason why not. I mean, but if I came along here today and with a book like that, you'd be saying, you know, what's in there? And I say it's a piece of wood. Well, wood's alien, maybe, to spines and things. It's never been used before. And you're trying to disguise the fact that it's a concave spine. Right. You're trying to pretend it's not. And I wanted to come along and just face you all head on and say, this is it. Well, I think it's much more suitable. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say it's much more suitable. It's more suitable for that sort of use than it possibly is for a fine binding. A fine binding, I feel it's okay for a fine binding because it's still new, it's still a novelty, it's sort of an evolution of binding history, I think. I mean, there's probably people who disagree with me and think it's a blind alley and that's it, you know. But I think it's a sort of an evolution of binding history, and so I can justify it as a fine binding, but I think it actually has got a much more comfortable place in heavily used book structures, because for obvious reasons. I mean, I was going to bring that up. It's the same problem with a stiff paper or with a paper of the wrong grain with this structure as it is with a controlled convex spine. If it's an uncontrolled convex spine, like this is, then that would probably be more suitable for thick paper or something the wrong way of the grain. But if you don't line it and it's that flexible, I mean, what we're doing here is, I spent 5.5 years working for Sandy Cockerell. This is Douglas Cockerell's binding, and for the last century, everybody has wanted to be flexible. And so now suddenly, I'm stupid enough to come along here. Everybody else does nice, safe things. And I'm saying, you know, maybe this is not the way to go. Maybe we shouldn't be flexible. Maybe we should be rigid, but we should have flexibility at the same time. I mean, doesn't that make a sort of sense? Yeah, you're probably right. Thank you, Philip. I will. That's right. Look at your yellow pages. It's trying to tell you something. Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, and you know, you could have a flat foredge and avoid the squares on the foredge by cutting it square, but I didn't want to get into all those things which I would then be accused of compromising the structure by making it look like a structure which was traditional. So, but yeah, yeah, okay. I mean, some people have commented that they think that the four edge is more vulnerable. In fact, I think the opposite. I think in this sort of book, when you open it, you've got these leaves which aren't supported. They're only supported by half the number of leaves this way. But with this structure, the four edge is much more supported because you've got this round going out that way. So this is more vulnerable here because you can catch that few leaves, and there's nothing to catch here. Well, someone said that to me the other day, and I said, well, how do you open a book? You know, where do you turn the leaf from? From the front, from the top, or where? And they said, from the top. So, yeah, you can open the book, you know. You just turn the leaves. I've done lots, in the early days I did lots of experimental versions of it, and I did one just covered in buckram, really basic, a case binding. And yeah, it was okay, it was no problem. It was a tight back. It could have been blocked, of course, or tooled before it was put on, but it was a tight back. And I also left it concave. I didn't do as Philip suggested, make it flat, because again, I just wanted to go the whole hog, and then maybe. Hello. There's certainly for use. I don't know. Well, that's one I've never been asked before. Let me think. Yeah, I guess you could. I mean, it'll do that. You can have. it'll. You know, the leaves will move adjacent to each other. So yeah, I guess you could do a double four-edge painting. Yeah. Well, it's very friendly to handle. I mean, people sort of initially are horrified and think, oh my God, what's going on? But if you handle it, your fingers fit into the spine. It sort of, you soon get very used to it, to the handling it and to using it, and it does seem to function quite easily. So it's you know, yeah. No, I didn't know that. When was that done? No, I didn't know that. No. Well, nothing's new, I guess. Okay.